A dark forest held more than just wolves and bears. It concealed dragons in its shadows, and the deep ocean hid mermaids within its gloom. These creatures were born from a powerful human need to explain a mysterious world, and for medieval people, their enchanted bestiaries were the ultimate guides. These were not simple fairy tales, but the science textbooks of their era, mapping a universe where every animal, real or imagined, was packed with symbolic meaning. By the end of this journey, you will understand how our ancestors used mythical beasts to explain everything from storms to sickness, revealing a lost world view where nature and story were inseparable. How did a lion's sleep habits prove a religious truth, and why was a unicorn's horn thought to purify water? This was a time when the natural world was a vast, illustrated manuscript waiting to be decoded. What animal from legend do you think held the most surprising explanation for a simple fact of life? Turn the page of one of these illuminated manuscripts, and you enter a world where every creature has a secret to tell. The core of a medieval bestiary was this beautiful, intricate dance between a physical description and a spiritual meaning. Think of it less like a modern encyclopedia and more like a moral codex disguised as a book of beasts. Its primary source was an ancient text called the Physiologus, a Greek work from Alexandria that laid the foundation centuries earlier. That original text presented a collection of animals and then immediately interpreted their natures as symbols of Christian truth. Medieval scribes and scholars took this framework and expanded it, pouring their own local folklore and observations into the mix. So you might open a bestiary and find an elephant standing beside a dragon. The elephant would be described with surprising accuracy, its size and strength noted, but then the text would reveal its symbolic heart. The story went that if an elephant fell, it could not get up again. A smaller elephant would try and fail to help, and only the arrival of a tiny, clever mouse could solve the problem by chewing through the bonds that trapped the great beast. This was read as an allegory for humanity's fall from grace and its need for Christ's salvation. The animal's imagined behavior was not a mistake, it was the entire point. It was a key designed to unlock a deeper, divine truth about the world. This blending of a little bit of real observation with a lot of inherited story and religious teaching created a powerful lens. Through it, the natural world was no longer a chaotic place but a second holy book, written by God and filled with creatures that were all, in their own way, preachers. No creature embodied this symbolic system more perfectly than the lion. It was the undisputed king of the medieval bestiary, a figure of immense power and profound spiritual significance. Authors did not just describe the lion's strength, they encoded it with three principal natures, each a key to understanding the divine. The first claimed that a lion, while walking, would use its tail to brush away its footprints in the dirt. This was not a simple act of stealth, but a symbol of how Christ, in his human form, concealed his full divine nature from the world, moving among people without leaving an obvious trail of his true identity. The second nature described the lion sleeping with its eyes wide open. This striking image represented Christ's eternal, watchful vigilance over his followers, a promise that even in the sleep of death, his protective gaze never wavered. But the third and most powerful analogy concerned the lion's cubs. It was said they were born dead and remained lifeless for 3 full days. Then, on the third day, their father would arrive and breathe upon them, roaring to call them into living, breathing life. For a medieval reader, the parallel to the resurrection of Christ was unmistakable and profoundly moving. Here was a powerful, tangible animal whose very existence seemed to preach the gospel. Its imagined behaviors transformed complex, abstract doctrines into something you could almost see and hear, a story told in the language of nature itself, making faith accessible and unforgettable for a society where few could read the scriptures directly. Yet the lion's roar of resurrection was not the only sermon echoing through the medieval woods. In the deepest, most pristine part of the forest, a place believed to be untouched by human sin, dwelled the unicorn. This was no gentle fantasy, but a small, fierce, horse-like animal, almost goat-like in its agility, with a single, spiraled horn of pure white jutting from its forehead. Its defining trait was an absolute purity that made it impossible to capture by any conventional hunt. Swords and snares would fail, for the unicorn's spirit was as untamable as its body was elusive. The only method to trap this magnificent beast, as the bestiaries meticulously detailed, was a ritual of paradoxical gentleness. A pure virgin had to be left alone in its woodland domain. Drawn irresistibly to her innocence, the unicorn would approach, lay its head gently in her lap, and fall into a trusting sleep. Only then could the waiting hunters emerge to capture it. This entire elaborate scene was a profound allegory. The unicorn represented Christ, a divine force of pure spirit captured by humanity through the vessel of the Virgin Mary. Its gentle submission in the lap of innocence mirrored the incarnation of God into the mortal world. But the unicorn's power was not just spiritual, it was also intensely practical in the medieval mind. Its legendary horn, known as an alicorn, was believed to possess the miraculous ability to purify poisoned water. A cup carved from this horn could neutralize any toxin, a direct and tangible explanation for a mysterious natural phenomenon. Why did some water make people sick while other water was clean? The bestiary provided an answer that blended moral purity with perceived medicinal power, turning an environmental mystery into a story of divine grace made manifest in a single, magical creature. But the forest and its pure-hearted unicorn were not the only places where medieval people saw divine messages written in nature. They looked to the skies and found a story of resurrection even more spectacular than the lion's. Gaze upon the sun as it sets in a blaze of fire, only to be reborn again at dawn. This celestial cycle found its perfect earthly counterpart in the legendary phoenix. This magnificent bird, often depicted with brilliant red and gold plumage, lived a life of solitary splendor. The bestiaries told of a creature so unique there could only ever be one in the world at a time. It was said to live for 500 years, and when it felt its life nearing its end, it would build a nest of the finest aromatic spices. Perching upon this fragrant pyre, the phoenix would face the rising sun and fan its wings so intensely that it created friction, setting the nest and itself ablaze. It would be utterly consumed in this self-made funeral fire, yet from its own ashes a new, young phoenix would miraculously arise, ready to begin the cycle anew. This powerful narrative was not just a fable. It served as a potent natural explanation for one of Christianity's most central and mysterious promises, the concept of resurrection and eternal life. How could a body die and then live again? The phoenix provided a tangible, albeit mythical, model. It showed a process where death was not an end but a necessary, fiery transition into a new beginning. This story offered profound comfort, giving people a framework to visualize a spiritual truth that was otherwise abstract and difficult to grasp. The bird's cyclical life, mirrored in the setting and rising sun, turned the terrifying mystery of death into a story of glorious, inevitable renewal, all written in the language of a mythical creature's feathers and flame. While the phoenix promised glorious rebirth, the deep ocean concealed a creature that offered only a terrible, watery grave. Sailors navigating the vast, unknown seas told terrifying stories of a deceptive island that was not land at all. They called the beast Aspidochelone, a whale of such immense size that its back would break the surface like a rocky shore. Over time, sand would gather on its rough, barnacle-crusted skin, and seaweed would take root. Even small trees might sprout, creating the perfect illusion of a safe haven. Exhausted crews, desperate for solid ground after weeks at sea, would steer their ships toward this promised refuge. They would drag their boats ashore onto the creature's stony hide and light campfires to cook their meals. But the moment the heat penetrated its blubber, the colossal whale would feel the burn. In an instant, the false island would shudder to life, plunging into the abyss and dragging every man and vessel down into the crushing darkness. This was not merely a sea monster, it was a walking, or rather swimming, sermon. The Aspidochelone was a direct and powerful allegory for the devil. Its entire existence was a lesson in spiritual peril, teaching that the most dangerous temptations are those that appear most attractive and safe. The creature's beautiful, tree-covered back was a lie designed to lure the faithful to their doom. This story gave a frighteningly specific explanation for the very real and common maritime disasters of the age. When a ship vanished without a trace, it was not just a random tragedy of wind and wave. In the medieval mind, it was the work of a malevolent, intelligent entity, a demon of the deep that punished those who let their guard down. The whale transformed the chaotic terror of the ocean into a stark moral lesson about the constant need for vigilance in a world filled with hidden dangers. High in the sun-scorched peaks where no human could easily tread, gold glittered in the rock, and it was the griffin's sacred duty to protect it. This was no ordinary beast, but a magnificent hybrid, a living emblem of power forged from two royal lineages. Its body was the powerful frame of a lion, the king of the land, fused with the head, sharp beak, and vast wings of an eagle, the sovereign of the skies. Such a union created a creature of unparalleled dominance, a guardian that watched over the earth's most precious treasures from a realm between heaven and ground. The Bestiaries spoke of their fierce, untamable nature, describing how they would build enormous nests of solid gold to cradle their young and launch into ferocious, diving attacks on any who dared approach their hordes. They were said to harbor a particular, legendary hatred for horses, creating a dramatic narrative of elemental conflict between the lord of the air and the steed of the field. For a medieval mind, this explained a very practical mystery. Why was gold, that most coveted of substances, found only in the most remote and inhospitable places, buried deep within mountains or scattered across desolate valleys? The answer was the griffin. Its presence gave reason to the randomness, attributing the location of treasure to the deliberate guardianship of a conscious, powerful being, turning geology into a thrilling story of theft and defense. Yet the griffin's meaning cut even deeper than its talons. Its hybrid form was a walking paradox, a seamless blend of two natures. Theologians saw in this a perfect mirror for one of Christianity's most complex ideas, the dual nature of Christ as both fully human and fully divine. The lion walking the earth represented his humanity, his tangible presence among people. The eagle, soaring effortlessly into the heavens, symbolized his divinity, his eternal connection to God the Father. In the griffin, this difficult, abstract doctrine found a form that anyone could visualize and remember, a creature whose very body was a sermon written in feather and fur. While the griffin guarded treasures in the sunlit peaks, a far more insidious king ruled the shadows below. The basilisk, the serpent king, was born from a profound perversion of nature. Its origin story was as bizarre as it was unsettling, hatched from a yolkless egg laid not by a hen, but by a 7-year-old rooster, and incubated not by warmth, but by the cold, damp body of a toad. This creature was the antithesis of the unicorn's purity, a being of absolute venom. Its very breath was a pestilent wind that could wither a field of crops and shatter stone. To look upon it meant instant death, its gaze a weapon that required no touch. This monster offered a chillingly specific explanation for the eerie and sudden misfortunes that plagued medieval life. Why did a traveler collapse without a mark on his body in a dense forest? A basilisk had gazed from the undergrowth. What caused a perfectly healthy patch of farmland to turn barren overnight? The creature's poisonous breath had blown across it. Even a sudden cave-in could be attributed to its rock-splitting presence. The basilisk transformed random, terrifying acts of nature into a confrontation with a conscious, malevolent evil, giving a face and a name to the chaos of the wilderness. Yet, even this king of serpents had a nemesis. The humble weasel, immune to the deadly gaze, could defeat the monster with its own powerful stench. This was not just a quirky detail, but a crucial lesson in natural balance. It taught that for every poison, there existed an antidote; for every overwhelming terror, a humble counterbalance. In a world teeming with invisible threats, the story of the basilisk and the weasel provided a sliver of hope, a reminder that no power, no matter how absolute, was without its own unique vulnerability. Far from the basilisk's shadowy realm, another terror haunted the edges of the medieval map, born not from corrupted nature but from the fear of distant lands. The manticore arrived in European bestiaries from Persian legends, a creature meticulously designed for horror. It possessed the powerful body of a blood-red lion, crowned with the unsettling face of a man, complete with intense blue eyes that saw you not as a person but as prey. Its most fearsome weapon was a tail tipped with venomous spines, which it could fire through the air like a volley of arrows. And its voice was a deadly instrument, a seductive melody that blended the eerie whistle of panpipes with a commanding trumpet's call, used to lure the unsuspecting within range of its fatal sting. Once it struck, the manticore would consume its victim entirely, leaving behind no bones, no clothing, not a single trace. This act of total consumption provided a chillingly straightforward answer to a common and terrifying mystery. When a traveler ventured into a remote mountain pass or a dense, foreign forest and never returned, what happened? The manticore was the answer. It transformed an unexplained disappearance from a mere accident into a narrative with a clear, if monstrous, culprit. But this beast was more than just a predator. It was a physical embodiment of the deep anxiety medieval Europeans felt toward the world beyond their known borders, particularly the vast and powerful empires of the East. The manticore was a grotesque fusion of travelers' tales, where descriptions of real but unfamiliar animals like tigers were exaggerated and merged with rumors about foreign peoples and their customs. Its human face made its savagery feel intelligent and deliberate, a representation of the perceived cunning and danger of non-Christian lands. In a single biological form, the bestiary mapped the terror of cultural difference, turning the unknown into something you could see, hear, and desperately strive to avoid. Even the most destructive of elements held a creature that could defy its power. The salamander presented a paradox that captivated the medieval mind, a small lizard that was said to live within the heart of a fire. If you watched a log crackle and spit in the hearth, the steam and moisture hissing from the wood was not just water vapor. It was proof. The bestiaries described a beast so cold-natured that it could not only withstand the flames but actually extinguish them, chilling the inferno with the sheer frost of its own body. This was not a random fantasy. It offered a direct, tangible explanation for a common, puzzling sight. Why did some logs sizzle and resist burning while others were quickly consumed? The answer was that a salamander was inside, fighting the fire with its innate cold. This incredible trait transformed the creature into a profound spiritual symbol. It represented the power of chastity and unwavering faith, virtues that could walk unscathed through the flames of temptation and sin, emerging purified and stronger. The legend was so compelling that it even gave a name to a very real and seemingly magical material. Asbestos, the strange mineral whose fibrous threads could be woven into a cloth that would not burn, was known for centuries as salamander's wool. A mythical creature had provided the perfect label for a natural wonder, bridging the gap between observed reality and a symbolic world, where every flame could hide a miracle. The ocean itself seemed to give birth to birds. Along the northern coasts of Europe, as the seasons turned, people witnessed the sudden arrival of the barnacle goose. No one had ever found its nest. No one had ever seen a gosling hatch from an egg. Its origin was a complete enigma, a blank space in the natural world that demanded an explanation. The bestiaries provided an answer that was as ingenious as it was strange. These geese, they declared, did not come from eggs at all. Instead, they grew on trees, or more miraculously, on pieces of driftwood tossed by the sea. They were believed to begin their lives as a kind of shellfish, a crustacean we still call the goose barnacle. Medieval manuscripts show detailed illustrations of these barnacles, their shells cracked open, revealing not the expected mollusk, but the tiny, feathered form of a bird emerging into the air. This was the concept of spontaneous generation, the belief that life could spring directly from non-living matter under the right conditions. For a society with no maps of the Arctic and no understanding of long-distance migration, this was a perfectly logical solution. It elegantly explained why these particular birds appeared and vanished with the tides and the seasons. They were not arriving from some unseen, distant land. They were literally ripening on the shoreline, dropping from their wooden wombs when they were ready to fly. This idea seamlessly wove a biological mystery into the fabric of a predictable, wondrous world, a place where the boundaries between animal, vegetable, and mineral were wonderfully and divinely blurred. Even the earth beneath their feet could hold a soul. In the moon-drenched gardens and fields, a root sometimes grew twisted into the shape of a tiny human, complete with arms and legs. This was the mandrake, the most feared and coveted plant in the medieval world. To harvest it by hand was to invite a swift and terrible death, for the moment it was torn from the soil, the root was said to release an unearthly, fatal shriek. This was not a simple superstition, it was a profound belief that nature itself could scream back. The solution was a grim and clever ritual of substitution. A foraging herbalist would tie a hungry dog to the base of the plant with a long rope, then stand at a safe distance and offer the animal a piece of meat. The dog, lunging for its meal, would wrench the mandrake from the ground, bearing the curse of its lethal cry and dying in its master's place. This practice reveals a world where the boundary between the vegetable and the animal kingdoms was porous and alive. The mandrake's humanoid form was not a coincidence, it was evidence. It reinforced the idea of a deeply animated creation, a universe where every rock, stream, and plant possessed its own spirit, its own will, and its own voice. Its terrifying scream was the personification of nature's violent resistance to being mastered, a powerful warning against careless exploitation. Yet this danger was precisely what made the root so valuable. Its very real narcotic and hallucinogenic properties, which could induce a trance like sleep or visions, explained its potent role in both medicine and magic. The mandrake was a perfect paradox, a healer that could kill, a plant that was almost a person, embodying the medieval conviction that the entire natural world was a conscious, sentient, and often perilous partner in the human journey. Inside the quiet chamber of a nobleman's castle, a different kind of physician waited on a silk cushion, a small bird of purest white known as the Caladrius. Its role was not to chirp or sing, but to perform a silent, miraculous diagnosis. A gravely ill patient would be brought before it, and all present would watch the creature's eyes with a desperate, breathless hope. The entire outcome of the sickness rested on a single, simple gesture. If the Caladrius looked upon the suffering person and then deliberately turned its head away, refusing to meet their gaze, it was a death sentence. There was no cure, but if the bird locked its eyes with the patient, a profound transformation would begin. The Caladrius would draw the entire illness directly from the human body into its own, absorbing the plague or the fever. Then it would fly straight up toward the blazing sun, and as it ascended, the sickness would burn away, scattered into nothingness by the pure light. The patient would be cured, and the bird would return unharmed. In an era where a simple infection could be a mystery with a fatal end, the Caladrius provided a powerful, tangible story for the terrifying uncertainty of disease. Why did one person in a household recover while another, suffering the same malady, perish? Medieval logic found its answer not in invisible germs or immune responses, but in the judgment of a pure white bird. It personified the invisible line between recovery and decline, attributing the outcome to a divine agency that could perceive a person's inner purity or fate. The creature was a walking, breathing narrative of hope and divine intervention, turning the chaotic tragedy of sickness into a process with a visible, understandable ritual. Its gaze became the ultimate verdict, a moment where faith and nature met at a patient's bedside to deliver an answer that medicine, for centuries, simply could not. Even the smallest contradictions in nature could birth a monster. In the quiet, sun-baked patches of earth between larger stones, medieval scholars placed the antlion, a creature whose entire existence was a biological impossibility. Its name was its entire tragic story, born from the union of a lion and an ant. From this contradictory parentage, it inherited a fatal legacy. Its lion nature demanded large, meaty prey, but its ant physiology and small size made such a hunt impossible. Yet its ant nature required the tiny grains and insects that its lion's spirit found utterly repulsive. Trapped between two irreconcilable identities, the antlion was condemned to a life of perpetual starvation, forever desiring what it could not have and refusing what it could. This pitiful beast was far more than a curious oddity. It was a profound moral lesson written in the dust. It served as a stark allegory for any person caught between two worlds, perhaps someone of mixed parentage or conflicting loyalties, trying to navigate two cultures or two sets of principles that could not be reconciled. To a society that valued clear social roles and unwavering faith, the antlion was a walking warning. Its struggle was not seen as simple bad luck, but as the inevitable, divinely ordained consequence of an unnatural union. When a farmer found a runt in a litter of pigs that failed to grow, or a lamb born with a strange malformation that kept it from thriving, the bestiary provided a framework. This was not a random act of nature, but the visible result of a deeper spiritual contradiction, a life cursed from its very beginning by a war within its own soul. Yet even in a world of divine symbols and deadly monsters, there was room for laughter. From the distant lands of Asia came the Bonacon, a creature designed not for terror or spiritual lessons, but for pure, absurd spectacle. It looked formidable enough at first glance, with the powerful, stocky body of a bull and the flowing, handsome mane of a horse, but a closer look revealed its singular, ridiculous flaw. Its horns did not spear outward to gore its enemies. Instead, they curled tightly and uselessly back toward its own head, making them completely ineffective for any kind of defense. This left the beast with a problem, and its solution was as bizarre as its anatomy. When faced with a predator, the Bonacon did not charge or run. It simply turned its back, bent its head, and unleashed its true weapon, a torrent of caustic dung expelled with such explosive force and in such immense volume that it could cover an area the size of an acre. This acidic deluge was said to scorch the earth, searing the grass and trees, and was so repulsive that it would send any wolf or hunter fleeing in disgust. For a medieval farmer discovering a strange, circular patch of barren, burned-looking ground in an otherwise healthy field, the Bonacon provided the perfect culprit. It explained a very specific and puzzling kind of environmental damage, not with a demon or a divine judgment, but with the frantic, comical act of a creature that was simply trying to survive. This beast served a vital purpose in the enchanted bestiary, injecting a note of earthy, irreverent humor into a collection often filled with solemnity. It was a reminder that nature's vast catalogue of mysteries was not always majestic or terrifying. Sometimes it was just profoundly, hilariously absurd, balancing the awe of the phoenix and the terror of the basilisk with a simple, universal truth that even in a world written by God, things could get very, very messy. In the intricate world of heraldic symbols where animals were chosen to represent noble virtues, the Yale stood apart as a master of tactical defense. This was no simple goat or antelope, but a beast engineered for a world of constant, unpredictable threat. Its most astonishing feature was a pair of long, sharp horns, each mounted on a separate, swiveling joint. With this unique anatomy, the Yale could face one direction with its body while positioning its horns to cover a full 360 degrees. It could charge forward, one horn aimed like a spear at an enemy ahead, while the other remained locked backward, a sharpened pike ready to impale any predator attempting to attack from the rear. This was not brute force, it was biological genius, a living lesson in strategic awareness. For a knight or a feudal lord, this creature perfectly embodied the constant pressure of managing multiple fronts. A noble house had to worry about rival families on its borders, political intrigue at court, and the loyalty of its own vassals, all at the same time. The Yale translated this abstract, stressful reality into a simple, visual principle. It showed that true strength lay not in a single, overwhelming charge, but in a flexible, perpetual readiness. Its form made the complex idea of multi-front defense feel as natural and inevitable as the turning of its horns, suggesting that the best way to navigate a dangerous world was through clever design and unblinking vigilance, a lesson as valuable in the council chamber as it was on the battlefield. Even the mighty river Nile had its own resident moralist, a creature whose very nature was a lesson in deception. The crocodile, as described in the bestiaries, was the ultimate hypocrite. It was said to weep copious, sorrowful tears after dragging a man beneath the water and devouring him, feigning a profound and public remorse for the violent act it had just committed. This image, so vivid and unsettling, gave the world the phrase crocodile tears, a proverbial explanation we still use today for any insincere display of emotion. It transformed the animal into a walking, or rather slithering, critique of false repentance, of the person who sins openly and then makes a great show of their supposed guilt. But the crocodile's moral tableau did not end there. A second actor entered this dangerous drama, a tiny, fearless bird known as the trochilus. This bird was believed to fly directly into the crocodile's open jaws to pick scraps of meat from between its teeth, performing a vital cleaning service while the great beast waited patiently, never harming its tiny dentist. For a medieval reader, this was not a simple story of animal symbiosis. It was a stark allegory for the dangerous relationship between a tyrant and his flatterers. The trochilus represented the courtier who serves a powerful but vicious master, gaining access and privilege by performing a vile service, always living in the shadow of those deadly jaws. Together, the weeping predator and its obliging cleaner created a complete picture of corrupt social dynamics, using the behavior of a real animal to give tangible form to the abstract sins of hypocrisy and sycophancy. Why does a powerful person pretend to cry for those they have destroyed, and why do others enable them? The bestiary pointed to the Nile and offered an answer written in scales and feathers. Yet even the mighty elephant, a creature of flesh and bone, became a giant of pure allegory within the bestiary's pages. Its sheer size and unfamiliar form baffled the medieval mind, leading to a cascade of extraordinary beliefs that reshaped its biology into a spiritual guidebook. One of the most persistent legends claimed the elephant had absolutely no knee joints. Its colossal legs were pillars of solid bone, incapable of bending. This explained, in their view, why such a powerful animal could be so curiously vulnerable. It was said an elephant had to sleep standing up, leaning its full, immense weight against a sturdy tree for support. This single, imagined physical limitation spawned an entire hunting method. Poachers would secretly saw partway through the tree, creating a deadly trap. The elephant would lean into its rest, the trunk would snap, and the giant would crash to the earth, completely unable to rise on its own. But the story did not end in tragedy. Here, the elephant's second, nobler nature emerged. Another elephant, a smaller one, would try and fail to lift the fallen behemoth. The solution would only arrive with a tiny, clever mouse who would scurry in and gnaw through the final bonds holding the giant down. This entire sequence was read as a grand allegory for humanity's fall from grace and its need for divine salvation, with the mouse symbolizing the unexpected power of Christ's message. Yet the elephant's moral instruction extended even further. It was held up as a paragon of virtue in its social life. Bestiaries describe elephants mating only in complete secrecy and producing just a single offspring in their entire long lives, making them a powerful symbol of marital chastity and restraint. They were also famed for their tight-knit community, always coming to the aid of a fellow elephant who was sick or wounded. In this way, the elephant's legendary lack of joints and its celebrated social bonds served the same purpose. They transformed a biological curiosity from a distant land into a familiar series of moral exemplars. The creature's imagined clumsiness and its proven loyalty provided idealized models for human behavior, teaching lessons about the virtues of community, mutual aid, and the surprising sources of rescue in a perilous world. The siren's song promised a truth far more intoxicating than any treasure. Medieval bestiaries did not show the fish-tailed mermaid of later folklore, but a creature split between heaven and earth, a woman's head and torso fused with the wings and claws of a bird. This hybrid form was a powerful clue to their true nature. They were not denizens of the deep, but beings of the air, perched on rocky cliffs overlooking the sea, and their domain was not the ocean, but the human mind. Their legendary music was so perfectly beautiful that any sailor hearing it would fall into a trance, a blissful, waking sleep where all sense of duty and direction vanished. The ship, left unmanned, would drift until it was shattered on the hidden rocks below, and the enchanted crew would drown without ever waking from their dream. This was more than a simple warning for sailors. It was a grand metaphor for a spiritual crisis. The siren's song represented the seductive pull of secular knowledge, of pagan philosophies and worldly pleasures that could lure a faithful mind away from the safe course of religious doctrine. In an era where the church was the primary source of truth, the allure of alternative ideas was a genuine danger, a siren call that could lead to a soul's shipwreck. Why did a promising scholar suddenly abandon his faith for a radical new idea? Why did a devout man risk everything for a fleeting earthly desire? The siren provided the answer. She gave a face and a voice to the internal struggle between piety and curiosity, between the safe harbor of accepted belief and the treacherous, beautiful waters of the unknown. Her music explained how someone could be led willingly and joyfully to their own destruction. The dragon was the final boss of the medieval world, a perfect storm of every natural terror. Its serpentine body coiled with the hidden danger of the forest floor. Its bat-like wings blotted out the sun like a sudden storm, and its fiery breath was the lightning strike that could set an entire landscape ablaze. This was not a random monster, but a deliberate amalgamation of the world's most feared elements, fused into a single, conscious enemy. When a wildfire erupted from a summer lightning strike and raced across the dry hills, consuming villages in its path, the bestiary did not see a random act of weather. It saw a dragon exhaling its fury upon the earth. The deep, subterranean rumble that shook the ground and toppled stone towers was not a tectonic plate shifting. It was the sound of a colossal dragon turning over in its cavernous lair beneath the mountains. Even the terrifying glow of a volcano erupting in the distance was not molten rock, but the inner fire of the beast itself, leaking from a crack in the world it had created. This creature gave a name, a face, and a malicious intent to the most destructive and inexplicable forces of nature. But the dragon was more than just a force of destruction. It was a miser. It jealously guarded hoards of gold and gems in its desolate lair, a trait that transformed economic scarcity into a moral drama. Why was treasure so hard to find? And why were the richest veins of gold always in the most dangerous, inaccessible places? Because a dragon was there, a physical representation of the wilderness itself, actively resisting human expansion and greed. This is why the story of the knight or saint confronting the dragon resonated so deeply. The battle was never just about killing a beast. It was a cosmic drama, a ritual where human courage and divine favor confronted the raw, untamed chaos of the world. The dragon's death was a promise, a narrative that assured people that order could triumph over chaos, that civilization could push back the wilderness, and that faith could ultimately conquer the most profound evil. The scorched earth left by a wildfire could now be seen not as a meaningless tragedy, but as the final battleground where a great victory might one day be won. But this violent act of renunciation was not the only lesson the beaver offered. Its very home, the intricately constructed lodge of mud and branches, was seen as another form of sacred architecture. These structures, built against the relentless flow of the river, were marvels of communal engineering that seemed to defy nature itself. Medieval observers saw in this a profound metaphor for the human soul building a fortress of faith against the constant current of sin and temptation. The beaver did not just flee from danger, it actively constructed a bulwark against it, a sanctuary where its community could thrive in safety. This dual image of the creature, one moment performing a brutal act of self-denial, the next meticulously building a resilient home, created a complete spiritual model. It taught that a virtuous life required both the courage to cast away what was harmful and the diligent daily work to create a space where goodness could dwell. The Beaver's Lodge stood as a testament to perseverance, a man-made island in a wild world, showing that even the most chaotic environments could be mastered through cooperation and unwavering effort. Its story resonated deeply in a society where spiritual survival was seen as a constant, active struggle, providing a tangible animal example of how to navigate a perilous existence with both sacrifice and smart, stubborn construction. Another creature offered a story of salvation so fragrant you could almost smell it. The medieval panther was not a stealthy black predator, but a magnificent beast of many colors, a living tapestry of virtues. Its most celebrated miracle began after a great feast. The panther would retreat to its den and fall into a deep, 3-day slumber. When it finally awoke, it would open its mouth and release a breath of such divine sweetness that the scent would drift from its cave and wash over the entire landscape. This irresistible fragrance would draw every animal from miles around, from the mightiest stag to the smallest rabbit, all gathering in peace and wonder around the source of the beautiful odor. Only one creature fled in sheer terror from this scene of harmony, the dragon, which could not bear the panther's holy presence. For anyone hearing this tale in the Middle Ages, the parallels were unmistakable. The panther's 3-day sleep was the death and entombment of Christ. Its glorious awakening was the resurrection, and that miraculously sweet breath was the odor of sanctity, the alluring power of Christ's teachings and grace that drew all of humanity toward salvation. The dragon's flight was the devil himself being driven away by the triumph of divine love. Even the panther's multicolored skin was red as a symbol, each hue representing a different virtue of Christ, from his mercy to his justice. This entire narrative transformed one of Christianity's most profound and abstract ideas, the concept of grace, into a tangible, sensory experience. How could the message of a single teacher spread across the world and win so many hearts? The panther provided the answer. It was not through force, but through an irresistible and beautiful allure, a spiritual fragrance that the soul naturally yearned for, making the mystery of faith feel as real and as welcoming as a spring breeze. A clever predator understands the power of illusion far better than the strength of its own jaws. In the cultivated fields and quiet farmlands, the fox was never just a nuisance. It was a master strategist, a creature whose intelligence made it a far greater threat than any simple beast of prey. Medieval bestiaries tell a particularly vivid story about its methods. To catch unsuspecting birds, a fox would first roll in fresh, red mud, coating its fur completely until it looked like a bloodied, lifeless corpse. It would then lie perfectly still in an open field, holding its breath and playing its part with an actor's discipline. Crows and other scavengers, drawn by the promise of an easy meal, would land upon the seemingly inert body. Only when they were within reach would the fox spring to life in a sudden explosion of fur and teeth, devouring the birds that had been fooled by its performance. This was not random hunting, it was a calculated ruse. This behavior cemented the fox's role as the ultimate symbol of cunning and hypocrisy, a living embodiment of the devil's own deceptive ways. When a flock of chickens vanished overnight without a sound, or a single, clever predator consistently outsmarted every trap set for it, the fox's lore provided the explanation. It gave a name and a face to the kind of clever, frustrating intelligence that seemed to mock human efforts at control. The creature served as a constant, unsettling reminder that the natural world was not merely a battlefield of brute force. It was also a theater of cleverness and guile, a place where a sharp mind could be a more potent weapon than any claw or fang, perfectly mirroring the complex deceptions and strategic manipulations of human society itself. While the panther's sweet breath drew all creatures together, the owl's presence drove them apart. This bird of the night was cast as a permanent outcast in the bestiary's moral universe, a creature defined by its rejection of the light. The texts describe how the owl would hide in dark, lonely places throughout the day, only emerging under the cover of darkness. If it ever dared to show its face when the sun was high, the other birds of the air would immediately swarm it, screeching and diving to drive the unwanted intruder away. This was not presented as a simple fact of animal rivalry. The bestiary authors made the allegory painfully and explicitly clear. The owl symbolized the Jewish people who, from the medieval Christian perspective, lived in the darkness because they rejected the light of Christ. The mobbing by the other birds represented the ostracism they faced from the community of believers. This interpretation transformed an observed behavior into a powerful and damaging piece of social justification. Why was a minority group persecuted and shunned? The bestiary pointed to the owl and said it was a natural law, a divine order written into the very behavior of animals. The creature's nocturnal habits were not just biology, they were read as a conscious moral failing, a preference for spiritual darkness. This entry reveals the darker side of the enchanted bestiary. It was never a neutral collection of facts. It was a deeply ideological document, using the authority of nature to reinforce the cultural and religious prejudices of its time. The owl's story gave a seemingly innocent, natural explanation for a very human pattern of intolerance, embedding a painful social reality within the pages of a sacred-looking book. That same principle of a perfect, natural counterweight unfolded in the story of the asp and the weasel. Here was a serpent so clever it had its own defense against the snake charmer's power. The asp, a creature of deadly venom, was said to guard its ears by pressing one tightly to the earth and plugging the other with the tip of its own tail. This deliberate deafness was its shield, allowing it to resist the enchanting music that could lure other snakes to their capture. Yet for all its cunning, the asp met its match in the most unassuming of rivals. The humble weasel, small and fierce, held a power that could overwhelm the serpent's poison. It was said that the weasel could defeat not only the asp but even the dreaded basilisk, and it did so not with claws or teeth, but with the sheer potency of its smell. This was not a fight of strength against strength, but of one natural force cancelling out another. The weasel's odor was the ultimate antidote, a biological weapon that neutralized the most feared venoms of the medieval world. Why did a weasel emerge unscathed from a battle with a serpent that could kill a man with a single bite? The bestiary had a clear and comforting answer. It illustrated a world governed by a divine balance, where for every poison, nature had already planted the cure. Every danger possessed a specific and targeted counter-agent, if only you knew where to look. This narrative provided a crucial framework for a world without modern medicine. When a healer used a specific herb to reduce a fever or a poultice to draw out infection, they were participating in this same system. They were finding their own version of the weasel to fight the asp, trusting that the natural world was not a chaotic collection of threats, but an intricately designed network of checks and balances. The story transformed random survival into a sign of a deeper, intelligent order, a promise that no evil, no matter how potent, was ever without its ordained and humble nemesis. A hedgehog gathering apples in an autumn orchard was not just a sight of rustic charm, it was a living sermon. The bestiaries described how this small, spiky creature would roll over fallen fruit, skewering them on its sharp spines to carry the harvest back to its burrow. This remarkable behavior, whether accurately observed or lovingly embellished, made the hedgehog the ultimate symbol of prudence and foresight. It offered a clear, visual explanation for the very human need to gather resources before the cold set in. Why did the harvest need to be stored so carefully? Because even the humblest animal in the woods understood the necessity of preparing for winter. In an agrarian society where a single bad season could mean famine, the hedgehog's lore taught a vital, practical lesson. It framed the annual scramble to store grain, salt meat, and preserve fruits not as a desperate chore, but as a virtuous, intelligent act, a natural rhythm to be embraced and respected. This tiny creature became a moral exemplar, transforming a simple, seasonal behavior into a powerful guide for human conduct. Its spiny back, laden with provisions, was a moving reminder that wisdom and survival were often one and the same, a lesson carried on 1,000 tiny spines through the golden light of an autumn afternoon.